Welcome, impactful parents. Today we're going to be talking about integrate attachment theory to have better relationships with our spouses, teens, and children. Hello, my name is Kristina Campos, and I'm founder of the Impactful Parent, and I help parents of school-age children who want to be one step ahead of their kids to turn their chaos into connection with their adolescent. I'm a mom of four, a teacher that's taught every grade from preschool through high school. And today I help moms and dads like yourself to navigate that exhausting, confusing, frustrating, but rewarding world of parenting. So, welcome to the Impactful Parent. And today I have a special guest. His name is Brian Power. And Brian, in 2024, went from having a good relationship with his wife to a complete relationship failure that included a restraining order. But today they have a friendship and relationship that is wonderful. And now he helps others do the same with the use of the integrated attachment theory. I'm excited to have Brian on the Impactful Parent stage today to talk about the integrated attachment theory and how you can use it to have better relationships with your spouses, your teens, and most importantly, your kids. So, welcome to the stage, Brian. But I want to start with your story. First, tell us what happened because that's really how all this came about.
Yeah, I mean, so my wife and I in 2024, we had been together already almost 8 years at that time. I have a stepdaughter through her first marriage, who was at the time 13. My son was 4.5 at the time, and I would say we had what would be a pretty good relationship. You know, we really didn't have any financial issues. There was no fights over money, or there's no drug abuse, no infidelity, nothing like that, right? So we had some basic, disagreements about things and life and but mostly parenting, really, because parenting really did spark a lot of our childhood traumas ourselves and some of the issues that we would have as a couple. So when my son was born in 2019, that really started a lot of the arguing and some of the fights and stuff that ultimately would lead to 2024 dissolving from a pretty good relationship to a disaster. And so in early 2024, February, I actually came home from work one night. It was late. I didn't get home till 8, 9 o'clock. And she was ready, already in a mood because my son was acting up. And so she wanted to discuss some parenting and this and that. And I said, can we do this tomorrow? Like, I just wasn't ready. My throat was hurting. I was sore. I was tired. But she was ready to go. And so, yeah, that led down a path of like, okay, we had a little fight that night, but after that, we both she challenged me to get some therapy, and I agreed that I would, and then but I also challenged her to get some therapy. So we began this journey of, okay, yes, we're both going to work on some healing, but that also sparked a lot of emotional triggers as well. And so what I found out was a lot of our childhood trauma was beginning to play out, and she was seeing a childhood therapist that really dealt with childhood trauma. And she was going to the therapist. It was, it was healing, but it was also bringing up a lot of emotions. So I think that added a lot of fuel to the fire. So over the next 4 months, we went from having a good relationship to literally me having a restraining order against me, which at that point in time, just so you know, it was never a violent. I never threatened my wife with physical harm. It was all just emotionally based. It was all emotionally based stuff. But she needed the emotional break, and the only way she felt she could get it was through that restraining order. But that ultimately put what I thought was the end of the relationship. I figured it's over at this point. There's no going back from this. This had dissolved to something absolutely crazy. So I decided, it was time to move on. Now, normally I probably would have ran away and gone back to Florida, which is kind of where I'm from. I live in the Boston area, but I would have probably just packed up, moved back to Florida. But I have a son. And my buddy challenged me. He said, listen, he said, you can't move back to Florida. He said, my father abandoned me. Your father abandoned you. And look at all the stuff we're dealing with as adults because of that. He said, you have to stay there. And I said, you're right. I can't leave. And I knew at that point I had to fight, scratch, claw, whatever it was to make sure I stayed in the area to be as good a parent as I could for my son, because I truly believe that, once we have kids, our lives are no longer our own. I truly believe it's theirs, and that we owe it to them to do everything we can to not pass on the wounds and stuff. So I knew I was in a bind. I didn't want to go through this, but I had no choice. I just put one step in front of the other, and God willing, everything turned out to be a pretty amazing journey for sure.
Well, kudos to you, first of all, for sticking around. Not the easy choice, especially if that was your coping mechanism that you're used to and that's what you default to change that and have a conscious decision of, I'm going to do better and I'm going to try something hard and uncomfortable and just really outside of your comfort zone, which was sticking around and working it out. I mean, just kudos to you. That is not easy work at all. So I'm sure that we have parents who are going to listen to this and resonate with that. But let's get to this integrated attachment theory that you speak of because it sounds very academic. But in simple terms, how would you describe the core idea of this approach? Because from what I hear, this is what really flipped things around for you and your wife. And we're hoping that it also helps others who might want to look into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very fortunate to come across Thais Gibson out of Canada. She created integrated attachment theory. Now, attachment theory has been around since like the 70s, but she started integrated attachment theory, which was a way not just to understand the way we attach in relationships, but also a process of beginning to how to heal the problems that we have, right? So, but I had come across one of her videos about a month before the restraining order was put on me. So I was already kind of interested. I was fascinated by a podcast. I found her on Mel Robbins' podcast that she did, and I was like, man, there's some really great information here about the attachment styles. And so I started delving into the work again, even before the restraining order came on. Once the restraining order did come on, I was just still like, okay, well, I'm not backing off on this. I felt like, you know what, there are answers here. I want to learn. I want to know that, I'm going in the right direction. I knew that I would have a relationship with somebody again. I didn't know if it would be my wife. At that point, I didn't think it would be. I thought that was over, but I wanted to just like keep learning, keep growing, keep changing. And little did I know that through that process, I would just heal myself and continue to heal, but I would have a second chance, to put things together with my wife. And so, I truly believe that sometimes time away and things can happen and bring us to the rock bottom, but they can be the best experiences in the world if we let it. If we allow these things to challenge us, if we allow failure to be the motivator to say, okay, we're never going to go here again. We're going to let this, change us and move forward. Failure can be the greatest motivator and the greatest thing that ever happened to us. And that was my journey. And I was very fortunate to have experienced that. We have to do the work ourselves a little bit, right? But if we do put our head down, we do the work, we're willing to sacrifice, make those efforts. There's some great rewards on the other side. So
Do you have any comparison that you can do? Like, how does it differ from other therapeutic models that maybe you've encountered?
I couldn't say that so much. I'm not delved into too many different modalities as far as therapy goes. I know my wife was dealing with a childhood trauma specialist, which was great for her because a lot of our issues as adults come from childhood trauma. And what I learned through at least integrated attachment theory was that 95 to 97% of our decisions in life really come from the subconscious, and that the conscious cannot override or outwill the subconscious. So essentially, we're almost on autopilot, right? And so, if we've been developed all these kind of wounds and some different ways that we, handle life and the way we perceive relationships and stuff, if we have them and those are unhealthy views and unhealthy thought patterns, if you will, they're going to cause us to act in ways that are unbecoming, right, and aren't going to be healthy. And so ultimately, they destroy a lot of relationships in time. And nobody gets married, nobody gets into relationships and have children. They're happy, they're excited, they're in love, but a few years later, all that dissolves, and all of a sudden we wake up and we go, well, who is this person, right? And now all we got these issues and stuff, and now we're headed towards divorce, and the children a lot of times are the repercussions of that unfortunate experiences that we go through. So yeah, it's a horrible thing, but I find that the subconscious is the main player. So we have to get in there. We have to learn what our wounds are, and we have to begin to heal those wounds so that we can now, retrain our brain, if you will, feed it different information so that now it's working on the autopilot, but with much healthier, thought patterns, if you will, that are now, going to benefit our life instead of, take away from it.
Now that explains a lot to me and resonates with me with why childhood wounds and making sure that we resolve those and heal from them can make us better spouses, a better parent, because we're coming from a different place. Our perspective has now changed. We've healed something that's literally blocked us in the past. But many parents feel overwhelmed by this idea of healing their own past, especially if you know that it's got some really bad
Mm.
stuff in there that you don't want to address. And to do that while raising children, oh my gosh. I mean, it's very off-putting to many, right? Because it's hard enough as a single person trying to do it while you're raising kids. Yikes. That's how a lot of people feel. But can you share what a breakthrough moment looked like for you when you first started applying the integrated attachment theory to your relationships?
Yeah, so I actually came through a child of the divorce myself, and a lot of, my mom was 21 years old with two kids, two boys, and my father was battled drug addiction and stuff. So, she went through that, and she had her own trauma, and she kind of raised us with that. Unfortunately, she didn't have that chance to, do the work and stuff. She was working two jobs and three jobs at times, just trying to put food on the table, but she did the best she could, right? But she did it with her perspective and the perspective that she did, through her childhood and where she was at that time in her life. I was very fortunate. Fortunately, I'm an older guy, so I'm now 56. My son was born when I was 50. So, I have a little bit more knowledge behind me, a lot of years there. So I did have some general wisdom just through life. But when the relationship ourselves, between my wife and I, we had different parenting styles. I was very much about connecting with the children, and really kind of making sure that their voice was heard, that their emotions were dealt with, and we kind of worked from that, not poo-pooing them so much, or not, just telling them what to do without having their voice and their feelings be heard a little bit. She was kind of old style, old style, which is what I came through. It was like, do what I tell you, you just listen and do what I tell you type of thing. And I don't want to hear anything else. And so that was her style. And so we kind of were a little bit combative over the years on that. And that was one of the things that really caused a big rift between us. I would say that the breakup and the time away really helped us both find out, again, healing our own wounds. And so I think healing our own wounds is the first and foremost thing we can do for our kids, because if we're not healthy, all those unhealthy patterns we are going to pass to our kids. Okay, so I know it can be hard to deal with that. I know it's hard to do the work. I know it's hard to say, like, oh man, that's a lot of work for me to heal that. That's true. But it's a lot harder if we don't do that. Our kids are going to heal. Those are the wounds that they're going to have to now deal with in battle. So it's very important that if we don't want to pass trauma onto them, we've got to heal it for ourselves. And that's what my wife and I were able to do through this breakup, is because of the trauma that she was, trauma specialist that she was seeing. She was able to heal a lot of her trauma. I began a lot of doing a lot of the work with the integrated attachment theory, which does bring out some of the core wounds, helps us realize some of those wounds that we're dealing with that are destroying our lives and our abilities to have good relationships. And so just doing all this work has been so enlightening for us, and such a different way that we both now parent better. My wife is definitely more on track with understanding that I was probably more correct. And I don't like to, say like, oh, I'm better than her or anything like that. But she understands that the connection to the children is super important, and that, that's important. Kids want to know that you're there, that they feel your presence, that you feel theirs, that you're connected with them. And it's not just, do what I say type of thing. And so my wife definitely loves that idea of connecting now. And now we both parent a little bit more on the same pattern. We don't want to just let our kids get away with everything, right? But at the same time, we want them to know that it's important. Their feelings are important. Their feelings are heard. Their voice is heard. But at the same time, we do have certain expectations about how things should be done and how we do that. And so we kind of discipline in a way that's, I don't just smack my kid around or anything like that, but I want to make sure that they know that there's a right and wrong way to do some things. And we're going to make sure that if they're doing the wrong things, we're going to stop that behavior, and we're going to kind of reward the right things a little bit.
Now, as parents, we often think about our child's attachment style. And that's not what this is. This is the integrated attachment theory actually really focuses on us, the parents. So, how did understanding your own attachment style shift your perspective on your relationship with either your spouse or with your kids?
Yeah, so I think as we begin to do the work on ourselves and we begin to understand the different attachment styles, we can see it in almost everybody. We begin to see it in our spouse. We can see it in our kids too. We can see where they're starting to develop maybe a pattern. And so it can spill over into children and everything else. But the idea is for us that, number one, I can't fix anybody else until I fix myself. Okay. So the focus is, okay, how do I deal with me? How do I find out the things that I need to do properly so I can get better? So number one, I'm going to work on my core wounds. Number two, the program, there's 6 core elements. Number two is the needs. I want to really discover my true needs. I want to deal with my emotions. Number three, how do I really handle my emotions? How do I use emotions as positive feedback, as information, so I can learn and grow from that? Not be afraid of my emotions, but learn from my emotions. How can I then set boundaries that are reasonable and healthy and good? And then make sure that people know how to, adhere to my boundaries a little bit, so I have to set the boundaries, then I also have to enforce the boundaries. Number five, I want to talk about communication. Communication is huge. How do we communicate with our spouse? How do we communicate with our boss? How do we communicate with our kids? How do we communicate? Because if we're communicating the same message but in different languages, sometimes that message gets crossed up, and now we're battling each other over something that shouldn't even be a battle. You know what I mean? So how do we communicate? And then last but not least, how do we change our behaviors? How do I act in a way that is respectful, that number one, my spouse respects, but also number two, my kids see a difference, and my kids can look on and say, wow, daddy's not flipping the handle, when and maybe he's handling himself in a different way. That because kids are going to really look at us more than anything. They're going to look at us as the example. So it's not a do as I tell you. My parents were like, do as you say, not as I do type of thing. Well, no, it says do as I do. I need to take that responsibility and say, look, follow me. I'll do the best I can to show you. I don't expect you to be exactly like me, but I want to provide a pretty good example of what I think a man should be and what my son should be like, right? But I've got to set that example and do the work to get there.
100% agreed. Role modeling is the biggest teacher for kids because their eyes are open. Even if they're rolling into the back of their head, I promise they're watching
Oh,
you.
they watch
Um,
everything.
but parenting, it brings these triggers. Like our kids trigger us the way nothing else in our life has ever triggered us prior to being a parent. I mean, it just is. It's so crazy how that
Yeah.
happens. But can you share maybe a specific example of a difficult situation with your child where you actually use the principles of the integrated attachment theory to respond differently than maybe you would have in the past? And then therefore you got a different outcome.
Yeah, I think for the most part is just understanding that, for listening to my child more. It's so hard. You're right. You're so right. Kids will trigger you very much. Like they just know how to push those buttons, man. They push the boundaries. They push all that stuff. So number one, just learning to just love them unconditionally and just take a breath and learning how to just control my emotions more. So again, this is some stuff that I learned with the integrated attachments theory stuff. Is that how can I use this emotion that my son is maybe now triggering on me? Why am I getting triggered? Why am I getting so upset or angry at the moment here? What is this? What is going on here? Right. So I love the idea of triggering now. It is not really a bad thing. Triggering when I'm triggered emotionally, it's just to say, okay, what can I learn from this? Why am I triggered now? How can I change that now so that I'm not triggered as much in the future? Okay. And little by little, the more we do that work, we find ourselves not getting as triggered as we once were. It doesn't mean I never get triggered. It doesn't mean I never get, a little frustrated or anything like that, but it's going to happen less and less. And I'm going to be able to handle that differently now. I'm not, instead of maybe getting emotionally about it and now maybe raising my voice and yelling and screaming, maybe I can get emotional, but not as much. Maybe I just take a step away. Maybe I just go for a little walk for 10 minutes. Then I can come back into the house and address my son and say, hey, this is incorrect. We don't do that or something. But again, catching our breath, taking a step away, doing some things that are just, not exactly what comes normal to us, natural to us. It's changing those things, but those things are huge. They're just hugely impactful when we do it. And again, our kids will see, exactly how you're handling that. Am I losing, blowing my top over every little thing? Or am I able to handle that situation in a calm manner? And now all of a sudden they go, wow, wait a second. Dad's able to handle that pretty calmly. Maybe I should handle that calmly. Maybe there's a different way for me to do that. And that's the thing. My wife and I, our main goal is to not pass our trauma and our poor behaviors, if you will, onto our children. We want them to grow up healthy and happy in their early teens and 20s and not have to be 40s and 50s and learning this stuff. We don't want to have them experience that type of trauma for all those years. So that's our goal. It's very motivating for us.
And I think there are a lot of parents listening to this who have the same goals because if you're from our generation, I mean, there there was just a lot that we might have dealt with, and it's hard to explore those, but we don't want to pass those on. I think that's a common sentiment with so many parents today, and our kids are very capable of being able to do that if we do the work too and lead that way, role model, like you said. But I'm thinking, what was the most challenging part of this healing journey for you? Because it's not an easy road. And that's really what stumbles parents. It's not the will of saying, I don't want to, so many parents want to heal themselves and therefore the generational trauma, but it is challenging. So, just coming from you and your perspective, getting the audience to identify with something that maybe you've experienced, what was really difficult for you in your healing journey? If you have a piece of advice that you can give.
All of it was difficult. Listen, I'm not going to say it's easy, right? But I am going to say it's rewarding, and that's the key. The first step is to take ownership of your own garbage. All right, your own crap. Okay, we have to be willing to look at ourselves and say, okay, I have some issues. I am not perfect. I have some things to work on. Okay, it's very easy to point the finger at your spouse. It's always to say it's their problem. It's their problem, and then she does it to me back. She says, "It's your problem. It's your." No, we have to take ownership of our side of this relationship, of who we are and the mistakes that we're personally making. That's the beginning of the journey. And then from there, it's putting our head down, finding some solutions, doing some of that work, and over time making those changes, because eventually they do catch on and they do change your life. And it may take a year, 2 years, 3 years. I'm still on this journey. I'll be on this for the rest of my life, right? But really, I'm better today than I was a year ago. And so the more I heal my own wounds, the more I learn how to communicate better, the more my wife and I handle situations differently. My parents look on. I just had my brother in town for the weekend, and he came up. He said, "Man, you guys are really great parents." And it was an honor to hear him say that. I just thought, wow, man, this is great to hear my brother, say, like, wow, the difference of our childhood, if you will, compared to what he sees, the way my wife and I handle things. And that's what it's about. It's saying, you know what? I know I'm still making mistakes. I know that I'm not perfect in this, and that I still have some things that I may pass on to my kids, unfortunately, but I'm going to do everything I can to not allow that to happen, and just fight, fight, fight for their sake. But yeah, you got to look at yourself. You got to do some of the work, put your head down, be willing to make some changes, and don't just keep doing the things, the way that you've always done them, right? That are incorrect. But also don't beat yourself up. It is a journey. It's not about being perfect, but it is about making some steps in the right direction so that you can get better, and then your getting better will help spill over into relationships of your spouse, your children, and everything. But yeah, that's just the start of it. Is just, yeah, put your head on, take some ownership for that. It's, you got some work to do.
Now, during all of this journey, we all come to a point where we just don't want to move forward anymore. Or maybe it's too tough. Maybe we don't want to face something. Maybe we just feel like we hit a wall and we can't figure out how to get around it, to continue our healing. So, if we have an audience member who's listening to us right now and they're in the middle of that journey, or they even just have a hard time starting, what did you think, what's some good advice that you would give somebody in that situation just to push forward? What can they do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer, for certain times it's good to get a coach. It's good to have it. You might need some therapy. You might need somebody else who's there that can help get us through those, experiences, because we're not always going to be able to, push through ourselves. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, like, you know what? I don't know. I've reached a point. I feel like I don't know where to go next or what to do next. I need some help. And that's the key, is just be willing to say that first, and then start reaching out, looking for some help. Find a good therapist. I believe in the integrated attachment theory program. I'm happy to point people in that direction. So if that's a solution for you, you may find that works for you. If for some reason it doesn't, then we keep on that search, keep looking, keep finding, and eventually you will find that, that program that works for you, that can kind of touch your soul in the right way, if you will, so that you can now begin that healing and move forward. But yeah, don't be afraid to, number one, look for help, ask for help. It's okay. Reach out to your friends, your family, if you have to first. Well, have that support system. Get a coach, get a therapist, get a team behind you. In order to be great, sometimes we need a team. And it's like, my wife and I still see it. We still see therapists. I'm still in the integrated attachment theory program. I still get on their daily webinars and daily school. I'm listening to videos constantly. I'm doing this all the time, because it is, something that isn't easy, and it does take some time to learn and grow from. But the more you do it, the more it does become second nature. So
Now, pretty much the same question here, Brian, but I want you to speak directly to the men in our audience, and the man that is weary
mhm,
of getting the professional help. I know a lot
mhm,
of men who are willing to do the work, but they want to do it alone and they don't want anybody to know. And then they're isolating themselves. And really, that's so much harder. And just as from man to man, because it doesn't come the same coming from me. It just doesn't.
yeah.
You've been there, you've been through that journey, and you are a manly man. For those of you listening to the podcast, they can't see you right now, but you seem like a manly man to me. And I want you to speak to those men who are in a stuck place.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Well, thanks for saying that. Honestly, again, I grew up without a father, right? And a father figure. I didn't have a good person to show me how to be a real man. And so I learned a lot of this on my own, a lot of struggle, a lot of, pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of mistakes, and I don't know what the men out there maybe coming through that similar type of situation. Maybe you didn't have a father either, or maybe you had a pretty good father, but for some reason you haven't been able to do it like your own dad or something. Whatever the reason is, or whatever your upbringing was, whatever the situation you find yourself in, if you're struggling and feeling like you don't have all the answers, and that's okay, because we don't. Okay, I'll be honest with you. You don't, I don't, nobody has them all. But like, it's okay to say, I need some help. I need somebody else to help push me along the way. And you can go at this alone, right? But it's going to be a snail's crawl compared to getting a good coach, getting the right person, getting a teammate who can say, we can take you faster and farther than you're ever going to go alone. So, listen, you want to do it by yourself, grind it out, yeah, good luck. It may not be as beneficial, but get a good coach, get a right teammate, get the person that you feel good about, right? A good coach that you can connect with and help share some experiences with and get you through those experiences faster, especially if you have children, because the longer we sit in the pain, the longer we sit in some of the negative states, and the longer we sit with that bad behavior, the more impactful that is on our kids in the wrong way. So instead of our kids being 10, 15 years old before we get healed, maybe we're healed at 5 or when they're still little kids. And so they're not, they're not going through all those extra years of seeing you, struggling and being in that type of situation. So to me, when it comes to this stuff, man, you want to get there as fast and as fast and as healthy as possible. We don't want to just get there fast and do it wrong way. We want to get there fast, but we want it to be proper. We want to know that, man, these things are really changing and having an impact on my family, my wife, my spouse, my kids, and everything. We're the leaders of this relationship. We need to be real men. And the first step to be a real man is to humble yourself and be willing to say, sometimes I need help. There's nothing wrong with that. That's my voice, and that's my opinion on that one.
Oh, I love that so much, and I appreciate that message.
Yeah.
So, if we have people who are resonating with what you're saying, where do we even begin? We want to learn more about integrated attachment theory. Where do we go?
Yeah, so I suggest everybody goes to my website first. It's makeyourrelationshipfail.com or myrelationshipfail.com. Now, my whole premise is, obviously we don't want to make our relationships fail, but it's kind of a play, right? But sometimes failure is that motivator. Sometimes failure is part of that element that we need to kind of help see some of these things so we can grow past that. But no matter where you are in that point in a relationship, whether you're failing as a parent, you're failing in your relationship, failure can be a great motivator if you let it. Don't be afraid or ashamed that, oh my God, I failed a little bit. No, it's okay to fail. But what we're going to do is we're going to take failure now and we're going to use that as a motivator. We're going to use that as something that's going to now launch us into a very successful state. I always like to think of a Super Ball, whereas the harder a Super Ball hits the ground, the higher that Super Ball is going to bounce. Okay. So if you're struggling with this stuff, go to my website, makeyourrelationshipfail.com. You can learn a little bit about me, our story, see some pictures, whatever. But from there, you can join the Personal Development School, which is Thais Gibson's school, which has all this wealth of videos and information that you can just like get in and delve into on your own. And again, if you want to coach, I'm here to coach you through that as well. If not, that's okay, but let's at least get you there. When you join through my website, I will give you one free coaching session. I'm going to find out about you. We're going to, hear your story a little bit, see if I can point you in the right direction. At least when you're using that personal development school, you'll kind of have a direction of where to go from there. And again, if you decide, man, I do want that little extra push, I want a little extra help, then you happy to work with you and see if we can get you in the right direction, faster and farther as possible. Yeah, that's the suggestion I have. Go to my website, myrelationshipfail.com or makeyourrelationshipfail.com.
I'm glad you decided to be here today. Begin your Impactful Parent journey by downloading the Impactful Parent app. The Impactful Parent app is free so that you can carry help, tips, and parenting resources right in your pocket. Discover answers to your parenting questions and how you can step up your parenting game and become a more impactful parent. Also, remember that this episode is just a small part of what the Impactful Parent offers. Also available are online courses, parent support groups, coaching services, and of course, the app. So go to theimpactfulparent.com to find out more. But until next time, you got this, parents. I'm just here to help.